All right. Not Martin, Marco Berg Scholten, writer, coach for many years, among other things. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I hope the weather is pleasant where you are. We got a little bit of a cold snap. It's probably in the mid 60s, which we would call Florida cold. But
Well, here in the northern part of Europe, it's around freezing, and we've had a beautiful day today. I'm actually close to the sea in the Netherlands, where I also live. I also live partly in Germany, and we've had a clear day with a blue sky and with some snow. But it's been an exception to have that clear sky. We've had a lot of rain lately.
okay, very nice. Rain's good to a point. Everything in moderation.
Yes.
So, coaching for a long time and writing now, I have a copy of In Search of Achilles, which I got a few weeks ago on Kindle through Amazon. And I was going to try to finish it before we talked. I have not, but I have started it and I will finish it. I liken the writing so far to it. It's easy to read, so that's good. And it has like a Hemingway type of feel. I'm not sure if you've ever heard that before, but it's so far the parts I've read is like a movable feast. Hemingway writes about normal everyday things, and he's explaining scenery and feelings, and I think that's what I get from yours. So I like it. It's a good read, and I will continue reading.
Wonderful. You just paid me an enormous compliment
Oh, Hemingway.
because I grew up. In our high school system, you have a mandatory reading amount of books that you have to read, and you have to do a final verbal test on it. And the reason my English list, we call it a list, was filled in no time was basically because of the work of Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, and
Oh,
I would also say a little bit Faulkner, although I'm clearly in the camp of the Hemingway style.
okay.
Um, so he's actually The Sun Also Rises is a book that I still reread, and it keeps blowing me away. The ability to, without saying the words, make you feel such a great mood and atmosphere um, of the times. He portrayed that so beautifully. Um, so I'm a big fan. So for you to start out with the old Papa,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
it
Well,
is that enormous compliment. Thank you for that.
that's how it came across to me, and I think that Hemingway was such a big deal then because you couldn't travel as much as you can now, or you couldn't travel as easily, and he could take people to a place with just the writing. So I think that's what people found interesting about it. Like when I used to listen to my grandparents talk about movies when I was a kid, I remember them saying, well, I like that movie because of the scenery. And there's a movie called The Big Bounce with Morgan Freeman and Charlie Sheen, and there's some other, of course, other people in it. But I like the movie, but more than the movie, I like the scenery. It's shot in Hawaii, and you just go, oh, okay, now I understand what my grandparents were talking about. And when I read Hemingway, I get that same feeling of you're enjoying the scenery, you're hearing the story. It's not difficult. It's easy to absorb. So
Did
it's
you
good.
read For Whom the Bell Tolls?
I did.
And it doesn't that take you completely to Spain? And
Yep.
and
And then,
the part in Ronda where Pilar speaks about the the execution of all the fascists over the cliff, it's
mhm,
unforgettable.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's good. It's my mom is a English teacher, was an English teacher, and she said if you can read Faulkner and Thoreau, then you've pretty much got the English language. So I wonder, from your perspective, how you feel about that comment.
Well, I believe complicated literature should be complicated is kind of a wrong term, but I'm Dutch, so you have to forgive me for my haphazard terminology at times. But I believe to get a complicated message across, or to get a deep feeling across, um, less words speak stronger.
Hmm.
So the Baroque of Faulkner is really like a puzzle for me. I mean, it's amazing his creative genius, and there's no discussion there. But it is just such hard work, and it doesn't leave me with the same depth of emotion and feeling that I do when I read, for example, The Great Gatsby, or The Sun Also Rises, but also For Whom the Bell Tolls, Dangerous Summer, A Movable Feast, but so many of Hemingway's work. I would add uh, Robert Penn Warren to that list.
Hmm.
There's a tremendous clarity in that writing, and uh, on the surface you're thinking, okay, this is an easy read, but it resonates with you, and you want to ruminate, so you want to reread it, and then you discover new layers, basically, and then you
Yeah.
ruminate once more, and your horizon opens up to the beauty of it. And with Faulkner, sorry to say, this is just my style of reading, that's the third rumination you have to do in the first take, in order
Hmm.
not to lose the thread of narration. It's
Yeah.
so. And yes, your mother is right. I mean, she studied for it. But my love for depth and simplicity is stronger.
Yeah, I do. I think that's why Hemingway resonates with so many people, is because of the simplicity of it, but it's still memorable, and it's like an easy conversation, I guess, you put it that way. It's you can, but you can go back again, as you just said, and get more layers from it. It's different than from like Melville, where it takes me a lot longer to read a page of Moby Dick than it does to read a page of A Movable Feast.
I started Moby Dick, and I really couldn't get through.
It's that one for me. I like it, and I would say it's probably my favorite book of American writers. And it took me a long time to read it. It made me a much better reader
Hmm.
because I could read other things. I read science fiction books while I was reading Moby Dick, and I could just fly through those. In Moby Dick, I would read a chapter or two at a time, usually one chapter, and then I would take notes. I'd take notes while I was reading, of words I didn't understand, or references I didn't understand, and then I would go look those up. And sometimes you go, "Oh, that's interesting to find out. I didn't know those things." And then other times it would take you a few sources to research it, and then you find out it was just a dig at the King of England.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh man, that's okay. But then I go back and read it knowing those things, and it was reading more in focus. Like before, you're like, okay, I'm taking it in. Maybe like some people read Shakespeare, where you're just, the words are washing over you, and you may not know every little thing it means. And then if you take time and look at it word for word or line for line, then you start to see the construction of it. And there were parts in Melville's writing where I see the flow and the lyricalness of it. And you can't get it when you're stopping and writing down a word or anything. So you have to go back and read it again. So I think that's what makes it great. I've read it a couple times over the years, and there are parts where I get stuck and go, this is a little, like when he's on the island and they're explaining the whale bones. That's a little like I'm kind of like, okay. Nevertheless, let's keep going. But it, for what it's taught me about reading, I appreciate it, and I can see why in its time it wasn't taken well,
Yeah.
and why Thoreau kind of, I don't know if Thoreau and him had a thing going on other than just writing friends, but it's it's odd for it to be dedicated to him, and then he drops off the friendship with Melville. But
Do you enjoy
those are things.
Walden as much as you do Moby Dick?
Uh, Yeah, Walden Pond or Walden's Writing, that time frame. Yeah, I like those.
Yeah.
I think it's easier to read than Moby Dick, but
Well, a lot of things are easier to read in Moby Dick
yeah.
because he's gotten so much from Shakespeare, huh? Just exactly like you said.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And well, what makes it a great book is, of course, that you can tell he's been there. He knows what he's talking about. He's sensed and felt and smelled the sea. He
Mm.
worked on a steamer and I believe he worked even on a hunting boat in his life.
Yeah, I think he was on a whaling ship.
He was even on a whaling boat. Huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he puts all this depth in it, and at the same time, he's been there, which
Mhm.
makes it complete, I guess. It's just hard for me to get through because I need, as a Dutchman, I need to annotate, and I need to, what you just said, I need to look things up because otherwise I lose the thread. Before I get to the point where I can catch on to the rhythm, as you said, I think I'm in my second or third rereading, which I will
Mm.
come to because a great work deserves that kind of attention. But I've still so many great ones to catch up with, So, but I will. I promise. I will.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's one bite at a time. You can't just sit down and say, I'm going to read it cover to cover in one sitting. It's definitely read a chapter, do something else, come back to it the next day. Let your mind absorb it.
Hmm.
But it's more half manual, half story. If you want to be a whaler or know what it's like, read that. If you want a story, read that. So
And if you'd had to summarize the book in one sentence or maybe even one term, could you do it? So
it's a good one.
what is the heart of that book? What is the beating heart of that book for you, especially because you like it so much?
Yeah, I would think discovery would be the word I would assign to it, but
Mm.
that can mean so many other things because you do have the Ahab, chasing that thing that is going to destroy him. But in that in that search, you're discovering things. So
So
maybe
spiritual discovery,
yeah, yeah,
epiphany.
I'd put it in in the same realm of why are we alive? We're here to experience. So it's discovery.
Then it's a great book.
Yeah.
If you can
What
get that, it's a great book.
what do you think? How do you think that your career in coaching has affected or affected your writing? How do you think the mind of a coach helps
Yeah.
writing?
Well, first of all, it helps you think succinctly. You can understand, you can relate to that, no?
Hmm.
As a coach, the right word is actually very important in coaching people. And succinctly is not only place, it's also time. So there is a time to say something to somebody, but there's also a time to hold back and to grow into understanding the nuances of those kinds of relationships, and then verbally become more disciplined in the process, because at the beginning I just said everything basically.
Mm.
I was a loose cannon when it came to verbal discipline, but it wasn't very effective in my relationships with the players. And slowly but surely, I believe, I hope, I've gotten better at it. And that really helps when you want to put the right word on paper, because your mind is like a pencil sharpened to being succinct and on the ball, because you can still be succinct, but you can say the completely wrong thing, psychologically speaking, or dealing
Mm.
with pressure, whatever it is. So that's the first thing I would mention. The second thing I would say is, an athlete who trains all his life, uh, with people he becomes very close to. I mean, blood, sweat, and tears if you do it right. And honesty is a big, big word in sports for me. That's why I don't like the NBA anymore, by the way.
Mm.
That's an A side. We don't need to get into that, but it's pissing me off. But anyway, um, uh, an athlete who works towards that goal, and then comes the moment he's in the finals. and he meets an opponent who is equally good and equally committed and equally strong, that person is naked in front of eternity, I always say. The process of helping people get there, get to the point where they can really, really, truly trust themselves under the highest fire, even, take on the game winning or game losing or season winning or season losing jump shot, in my case, basketball, is a moment of great openness. This is a life lesson for anybody. It, you have to help athletes um, drop off all their masks, kick under their feet away all their crutches, and then help them be the strong person that they can be from their life story on. Because it's not like a recipe to do it and everybody's the same. Not at all. It's nothing piecemeal. It's working with athletes like that, which is always my goal. I was always asking, how will you act? Who will you be when that moment comes? Will you be there? Will you be ready to be the strongest version of yourself without any bullshit, without any lies to yourself? Are you capable of being somebody who can lay everything on the line with the people he really cares for? Lombardi even said, I'm sure you know Lombardi, he even said that in his case, football team, there is love amongst the members of the team. And he said, it's not love a woman may have for his wife. It's not like that at all, but it's loyalty, which is the greatest of loves. I love that quote from Lombardi. The thing is, somebody who's at that point in the season, you worked all in, and that loyalty has grown through experiences to proven, your ability to hold your position under fire. Then comes that moment. That is a big moment for anybody. The development that I had in having people get there and then become good from within themselves there has been tremendously helpful in my life and also in my writing, because I think I developed Hemingway had a wonderful quote. He had a lot of wonderful quotes. One of them was, the first thing a good writer needs is a bullshit detector. I don't know if you know that quote, but I think that's very accurate. First of all, but secondly, I've been able to hone and sharpen my bullshit detector because of my work. Because you instinctively sense the phonies after a while. I have to say this though, you have to be in the fire in order to learn that. You cannot learn that from a theoretical perspective. You have to be in the finals. The first finals that I was in, I was still pretty young. I was, I think, 33 as a head coach, which is young to be in a national finals. Huh? And still, basketball is not a big sport in the Netherlands, but it's a huge sport worldwide. It was still a big thing, and I failed. I was close, but I failed, and that taught me more than anything else. So you have to be in that situation in order to be able to grow. And I would say those two things: the necessity to be succinct and on the ball in place and time, which is different at times, and the ability to help people be the strongest version of themselves without any mask, without any crutches at the moment of truth.
Yeah, I think that whole idea of developing the BS detector is one of the great things you can do in life just through living an experience, because otherwise you're going to be a sucker and people are going to be able to fool you or talk you into anything or lead you anywhere they want to lead you. So I've done a lot of things in my life where you were supposed to follow rules, where, being in policing and being in the military. But one thing they do, I think they want you to learn it, but you just learn it anyway, is to see through the crap. And you go, okay, what's the real reason for this? And sometimes it helps if somebody explains what the real reason is, but oftentimes you already know what the real reason is. So that would definitely be useful for writing. When you're what do you see the big difference in playing, like the mind of the player versus the mind of the coach?
Well, there are different roles, but if you do it right as terms of process, you almost develop a connection that becomes almost like an intelligent mind, team mind of its own, where you are just playing your role, but the connection remains intact. At that point, the Lombardi point of loyalty, I would explain it in that sense. That's later in the year. You don't have that at the beginning. You can intuitively react. You don't any At one point you have to be very stern and disciplining, depending on the person. The other point, you just have to let somebody break the rules because he sees something. In my case, I've always coached men. He sees something that nobody else sees, and you feel that he sees it, and you let him go there. Um, I think the player has to be more instinctive, even, and maybe the coach has to be more intuitive, because the player has to do the kill, and the coach has to do the putting people in position that they can kill. And I think the strategic part of putting a group in position so that players can kill requires a little bit more intuition and also a little bit more rationality, so a little bit more distance. Whereas the player has to, there can't be any hesitation between thought and action. Well, you've been a policeman and you've been in the military, so you would know that.
Yeah, that instant obedience to command is what they would call that.
Yeah,
Like,
but
go over there, and then you go over there.
yeah, but that's just doing slavishly what you're being told. And my goal was to get
Right.
players. My goal was to get players to the level where they knew the discipline and they respected the discipline, but at times they were able to do, as you just mentioned, step out of it because they saw the necessity for something, and they could act instinctively. And these instincts are very important in those primal moments, so to speak. And as a coach, you strategically, intuitively put people in that place. But as a player, I think the intuition is not as important as the closeness to your instinct. So that there, I would say the difference. But I would also say you're very close to each other under fire, coach and players.
Hmm.
And in the beginning of my career, when we won our first championship, I just sat on the bench a lot. I wasn't just such a standing ranting coach, and that worked well for me.
It's maybe that translates over to writing because you have the mind to accept that this is the story you envision telling, and then you have a character in it that perhaps through when you're writing it, even though you have a plan, the character has developed so much their own personality
Yeah,
that they have to go do this other thing that you weren't planning on them having to do, and you
yeah,
just have to be able to let them do that.
absolutely.
Hmm.
I completely agree with that. You cannot plan, as a coach, I really plan the season, and we also do that physiologically. We call that periodization. So
Hmm.
you invest in hard weeks to peak in the important weeks, and you do that
Right.
on a weekly level, but you do that on a monthly level, but you do it also on a yearly level. So as a good yearly plan, you want to be at the best when the playoffs arrive. But it's never gone, not one single season. I think I coached like 30 professional seasons now, or maybe 28, 29. I've also coached the national team, so that is kind of a shorter process. But it never went exactly according to plan. Never.
Hmm. Still, I think it's good to have the plan because you have
Oh,
that
you must.
structure.
You must. The Japanese have
You
a great saying about that. You go in through discipline, so you enter into the process through discipline, and then you go out on the other side, and then you can be creative.
Okay. Do you find that when you started coaching, you did it differently towards the end of coaching, or as a player, and then as having played the game and then coaching it? did you approach it from a standpoint of this is what I would have wanted when I was a coach, or did you see more of this is things I didn't think about when I was a player? Like,
All three.
okay.
So I always had the ideal team in my head. Yeah, and that hasn't changed. So for every new team, I write a yearbook or a plan. I plan a yearbook and I write it by hand. I still have all these books, 30 out of them. And I always start like John Wooden did. I had good teachers
Mm,
with the values that undergird your season. And that should also be the foundation of your team. So behavioral guidelines. And interestingly, the ones that the words that I use to translate values are pretty much the same 30 years on. So it's not like my values of what makes a true strong team have changed much. However, the way that I teach them has definitely evolved. Thirdly, I had the great fortune of having a great youth coach. You read my book, or I'm sure you read the first part of my book. That is almost
mhm.
autobiographical. Um, I had a youth coach who was such a wonderful coach, such a wonderful guy. He's in South Carolina, not very far from you. Or actually, he's on the border with North Carolina in the Smoky Mountains. Maybe that's
Mm,
North Carolina. But he played basketball in the States when the great coaches still held sway over the game, so to speak. So he was in the Atlantic Coast Conference when Dean Smith made all his inventions in the 70s and early 80s of, at University of North Carolina. But you had a bunch of great coaches there. And he, at a very young age, he taught me about, for example, John Wooden, but he also, the old school coaches. And that really put an imprint on me. So in the book, the narrator, that part is almost like a copy of me.
okay.
And I still have my blueprint of a good team out of those times. So that hasn't changed. But then after I became very short while, because I was injured when I was 21, I was also in the military and in a unit that was pretty high on being fit and heavy field training and stuff. And that they would always think when you had something that you would simulate not to be able to go to a field assignment of a week. So that aggravated a knee injury that ended my career very young. But in the period after I had my youth coach, John is his name, I was spoiled, I guess, because after that I got coaches who I thought were total shit. They were terrible. So that really crept into my coaching too. But I don't think that's necessarily bad. I don't think it's necessarily bad to take from the good examples your inspiration, but to take from the bad examples, in my case, the bad examples, uh, you know, the red lines that you don't want to cross
Yeah,
because you've had that frustrating experience.
I agree. Being in the military as a what they would say young lance corporal in the Marines and going through the school. This was a motor T school, and being in charge of the class and just things like field day, which is just cleaning on Thursday. And you go around and check and make sure everything was clean the way it was supposed to. So you're going through the whole platoon's barracks. And I found myself yelling at people that didn't do what they were supposed to, not because I was mad, but because that was the example I had seen in boot
Yeah.
camp and then in um, other places during that time in the training. And I remember thinking, man, there's got to be a better way than this. Why don't I just talk to these people like I would want to be talked to? And then I did that. It worked out better for me. I still see other people that, you know, do the other way. And I don't think that boot camp, a drill instructor shouldn't yell, but
I agree.
it does help when you get into the fleet or into the real world that you would take away the wildness and try to keep the message as simple as possible and explain as much as you could to get the buy-in from everyone else of why you're asking for something to be done a certain way. Especially in policing, I found that it's no good to yell at, if you're yelling at somebody so they can hear you, that's one thing. But if you're yelling at them because you're mad or you're trying to intimidate them, I, I don't see the point in that. I would say minimum amount of force necessary. And anytime you're yelling or cursing at somebody, you're just heightening the situation when you don't need to. And it's making you more excited. It's getting them more excited. So just be cool. Yeah. Be cool. So you can be. So
In coaching, there are nuances. Um, I I want players to be able to be strong in those kinds of situations. You know, the old Bobby Knight philosophy. And Knight was no fool. Huh? He was a real genius. I've seen so many clinics by great coaches, and his are, first of all, he was incredibly funny, but it's so knowledgeable. It's amazing. But the thing is, psychologically, he did prepare guys for, to be really strong under psychologically very demanding situations.
right.
So the gloves need to be off at times when you really want to work that part, but not always. I think there's a time for that kind of training. And also I found when you explain that you're going to do that, it doesn't work. So you have to kind of surprise them here and there with a yell left or right,
Mm.
because
Mm-hmm.
when do you become good is when you become good when you're uncomfortable. When you know you're going to be uncomfortable, you're not going to be uncomfortable. So you have to surprise. That This is what I mean with in coaching is my experience. Don't pre-explain everything. Put them in situations that they didn't expect. You being a Marine, I'm sure you've had that in your training.
Mm-hmm.
So on the human interaction, yes, but in preparing them for being uncomfortable outside of their comfort zone and still being able to be strong, at times you need to put them through the dark parts of humanity as well.
Yeah, it's like you were saying before, you have to experience a thing to know how you're going to react in it. So I can see the point of that in certain types of training where you have that going on. Plus you want to build that unit cohesion and get people to work together better. So if they go through something tough together, then they're probably going to form a different bond than they would have if it was all rainbows and teddy bears. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
How do you think that all that experience affects the way you prepare for writing? Like, do you still do you do a lot of pre-writing? Do you do you think about it a whole lot before you start writing, or what's your process for starting a new project?
Well, I can give you the answer concerning In Search of Achilles, and I really hope you finish it, because the
I will.
synopsis of this book I wrote in 1990 when I was basically just starting out as a basketball coach. I just finished my studies, and I was already a basketball coach, but an assistant coach, and then I became a head coach at 26 in the second league. Anyway, that's when the synopsis came to me, or I put it out, and the 30 chapters that the book has is from that synopsis. In 33 years, it hasn't changed. But then I became a basketball coach, and I found, because in terms of time, you as a basketball coach, you train in the morning and you train in the afternoon or sometimes in the evenings. Here in professional basketball in Europe, it's usually in the evenings, and in between you do some video analysis and some meetings. But there's basically enough time to do other things. So if you look at it purely from a quantitative perspective, that should be a good time to work on a novel, for example. And I actually tried it in 1990 after I wrote the synopsis, because this book has been burning inside of me since then, and it never left me. And that's why I'm really happy it finally came out. But I found I could not do it that way. I could not compartmentalize. Now I'm a writer. Now I get into the flow of the writing. I just couldn't do it. And coaching a basketball team is also like a stream. It's a conscious stream. And if you take a break, sometimes it's good to get perspective. But if you take a break every day on the same time, it breaks the stream so much, you lose a lot of the signals that you have to subconsciously process in order to be able to respond properly to help the process along. So they couldn't exist together. And I also found that in writing, most of the work is actually done subconsciously after you've got your synopsis and you got your skeleton in order. So I start with a synopsis. No, I start with an idea, and I start basically with a feeling and mood. Mood is very important for me. And then usually the synopsis is born, and then you detail it a little bit, but not as much as you shouldn't do that too much, because the example that you gave of the character that grows its own storyline, you have to give space for that. But still, I know in advance what I would like to convey per chapter. I know, uh, how to work with attention. Um, Achilles is basically set up like a Greek drama, in the three parts. Is little similar to the traditional Aristotelian drama build. So I know all those things in advance. But then I start writing in the morning, and first of all, it's never like planned, because you want to get the mood right. I don't know if you have it, but I really want to get the mood right. So, and I'm writing on a typewriter, it's standing right there, because the first part of my writing, not the rewriting, but the first, I want that to be tactile. I don't want any machine in between me and the paper. I could do it by hand, but then it doesn't look like a book. Do you know what I mean? If you write with a typewriter, it already looks like a book. So the paragraphs and everything, I can visualize the book better. So I write maybe 4 hours, 4.5 max. Then I'm spent, and then I let it lie. And I noticed that most of the I've learned this on the fly, by the way. I've noticed that most of the writing is actually done in the subconscious, in the period where you do other things, and maybe in your sleep, because the next morning you can logically go on. So how has basketball prepared me for doing that? Well, first of all, understanding that you have to go in completely if you want to do it right. Just like with a basketball team, 9 months, you're on that train. You can't leave it. You can't take a holiday from a season. It doesn't work. Same for me with finishing a book. So every morning at daybreak, I get up, I do some exercises, I make my coffee, and I sit down behind that typewriter. Every day, 7 days a week. And this discipline, I'm sure, being a professional coach, understanding what discipline means, has helped me make it easier. The same for understanding that most of the work ultimately is done subconsciously. Because otherwise it would just be some sort of a tract. And both insights, I think I learned them through being a basketball coach. To go all out, to understand you can't take a holiday from it, because you break the stream, you break that rhythm that you mentioned with Moby Dick. You break the thread of narrative, basically. So in my first book, Achilles, it's the only book I published. Well, I published a book on basketball and on group dynamics, but that's not literary. I tried it in 1990. I had to drop it, and I was a coach until 2004. Then I took a year off. I had saved money, and I took a year off, and I wrote Achilles from the same synopsis in 2004, 2005. Started in the late summer 2004, and in February 2005, in my own language, in the Dutch language. In February 2005, I looked back on it and I said, no, this is shit. I would never want anybody to read this. This is just not good enough. It doesn't convey what I want to convey in the undercurrent. Maybe I named names right and the story goes, but for me, the undercurrent is the most important part. So I dropped that and I became a coach again. But the book never left me. It never left me. It stayed there for some reason. And then in 2021, I'm coaching in Germany, and I got into a conflict with the club, and they released me from my duties, which happens in pro basketball. Happens. But they were still under obligation to pay me for a full season. So I had all of a sudden I had time on my hands, and I started writing it in American English, which had been my lingua franca anyway from my work. But I also read basically everything in English. I just bought Thomas Mann short stories. I don't, and I have a German wife. I speak very good German, but I still read them in American in English, basically. The translations of Nietzsche. I order those in English. But anyway, I started writing Achilles in American English, and from the first moment, I felt, yes, this is the tone I want. That's
Hmm.
why it was such a great compliment that you paid me. Although I don't want to emulate anybody. I don't want to be a Hemingway-like guy. I want to have my own voice. But I still admire that quality tremendously, of course. So
Yeah.
that's the first book. That took me 33 years. Now I'm writing a second novel, and I find that it's not as so I'm writing it, and I'm like, okay, I got to go back because new ideas. It's like it's still a small little flower that hasn't blossomed into a full story yet. I know what I want to convey. I have the synopsis. I basically wrote out all the chapters, what I want to happen, but it's not about that. It's about getting the subconscious in tune, I guess, with what you ultimately want to say without saying it. The invisible part of the iceberg,
Hmm.
and that only happens if you keep the discipline.
Yeah, I visualize writing and storytelling sometimes like building a house, especially a masonry wall, where you can't put the whole thing up at once. You have to do a couple courses and let it firm up, and then do a couple more courses, and you have to put the reinforcement in, and there's other things that have to occur. So that's how I equate it with you write it, and then your subconscious works on it. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the hardening up of it. And then you can come back and put reinforcing in, that is, put the if there's some sort of foreshadowing you need to put in because something that happens later on, that's fine. You can put that in at a later date, but you have to put it in, while you're making it. And yeah, I see
But do you go back?
what do you mean? Like the day before, to the
No, no,
day
no.
before is writing, or?
Let's say you're building the house, and you're the foundations are there, and you're already the front wall is halfway up on the first floor, and then you
Mhm,
think,
mhm.
I got to put this in the foundation. With a book, that's
Yeah.
possible, technically speaking. With a house, that's harder.
Well, that's when you get to that point where you have that story you start in the early 2000s and then put it away and go back to something else, and then you
Mm.
come back later and you got to find the right median to create that art. So what just happened there was you started a book, you started a house, and you went from the plans to actually physically doing it, and then it didn't work out, so you had to start over. that's
Yeah,
that's all. i
that's
think i think every, maybe not every, but a lot of writers have things that they start and then they think, I'm not good enough yet to do this.
mm.
Or for some, maybe that's an excuse for why you want to go do something else, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's the truth is you started it and you don't possess the necessary tools or knowledge to tell the story you want to tell. So you have to set it aside, go do something else, and then come back to it later. And maybe that's just what the universe wants from you for this story, because you don't want to mess it up. But
uh,
yeah, I think it's okay to come back to it. I understand that part of, once you start it, and then if you stop, it's hard to pick it back up, because you can write half of a book and then think, well, I'm going to start this other thing now, or get busy with something else, and then come back and try to finish that. You got to read it all over again, because you can't remember all the little things you were holding in your mind to be able to connect in the way that story was being told to you from wherever stories are told to you. So I don't know if it's coming from your subconscious, if you're manifesting it within yourself, of creating these ideas for the story, or if you're working through some other source or inspiration that is telling you the story, or whether it's narrating it or just showing you the direction to go, or a mix of all of that. What do you see as the way for you? How do you get those ideas? Where do you think they come from
That is
for
an
writing?
outstanding question, and I'm sure every writer recognizes it. Well, I believe, with the German philosopher Heidegger, that thoughts are not produced by us. I believe we allow them to come to us, and then we translate them and move them on. We transport them. This is what I believe. I have no empirical evidence for this, but this is how I feel. Why does a great book touch people so deeply? There is something connecting humans through those words, which is stronger than the individual imagination of, the developed cognitive abilities and the knowledge of the artists. Same with art. I'm not so knowledgeable on visual arts, but I believe the resonating experience that you have with great works speak to a deeper level of being in life. And I think everybody can have an open door to that, and but very few are capable of allowing these deep, strengthening, maybe affirming, or uh, in the case of Nietzsche, he wasn't. Well, in the case of Schopenhauer, he was saying life is shit, and so non-affirming, but
Hmm.
to allow those depth into your life, I think there's more at work there than just the individual human, with all his hard work and his studying and his scholarship, or whatever it is, experiencing, and then transporting that in the right way. I think uh, great inspiring moments are also bigger than the person who acts in that energy. I think there's always more at work there. So I believe that you have to use your knowledge, you have to use your individuality, you have to be you more than anything else. You have to be so unique, that you're not trying to copy anything, but at the same time you have to allow something beautiful to come to fruition. In our case, on paper, in words. The words are really the medium. They're not the goal. The goal is to allow and then to transport it. So you allow it, so you're able to receive something bigger. You can call that spiritual, you can call that religious, you can call that, whatever. You can also say, I don't know what it really is, but it speaks to a deeper level of human intelligence.
Mm.
And it's a great feeling to be able to transport it here and there. Um, but I think, if you can open to that, I think it's not just you doing the work anymore. I think, you've heard poets and musicians talk about the music writes itself, and I'm just the medium. Um,
Hmm.
I think Miles Davis has been caught saying that, for example. And when you listen to his music, you can really relate to the fact that he opened up for that kind of inspiration without losing his technical mastery. And if I can bring that back to sports, Michael Jordan, he was so free. He was technically unbelievable and physically unbelievable, but his mind was so free and so open that he could respond to any situation and create something new. So he would be put to a challenge, and sometimes incredible challenges, and he just found solutions. But I believe there's something bigger at work there, communicating through, that person or the author. I don't believe it's just our invention.
Yeah, to keep the stream motif going, it's like you hear the saying, "Go back to that well of ideas." So I always pictured that as actually going to a well and putting a bucket in it. That if you're going with the stream of consciousness or this getting into the stream of writing to keep that discipline going, to show up and make yourself available to whatever that is that's working through you to tell the story using your filter as it's the difference between just physically walking down to a stream and drinking from it, like using a cup or something to drink from it, versus using your hand to drink from it, versus putting your face in the water and drinking, versus getting in the water and then getting in the water enough to let it carry you somewhere else. That I think you can keep going with that motif and explain a lot of things. I think that does explain writing and visual arts too, because maybe the perspective for a writer is you're putting it into words, but the perspective for a visual artist is they're trying to get that picture of them in the water in that medium across. And that's how you get the visualization of it, not just the words of it. So yeah, I do like the way the Romans thought about genius, which is it's outside of you, that it's when you call somebody genius, you weren't saying they're genius. You're saying that genius, this thing outside of you, is what created that idea. And it's interesting how in America, at least now, it seems like we've lost the understanding of that idea. And we just think it's bestowing that upon the individual, that the ego is taken over so much that we think, oh, that's me, I'm a genius. No, the genius is out there.
But the monstrous insecurity that's below that, there's a narcissistic epidemic going on in our culture. America's first is leading in that, but it's in Western Europe as well. I mean, what incredible insecurity lies underneath, the need to be the surrogate of God, basically, as a creator. And the really good ones, they've never lost their humbleness, I feel.
Yeah.
They're not arrogant. They're strong, but there's a difference. Strength of personality is not equal arrogance. It's mistaken a lot by people who live in that narrative, who think it's only egos, which is also an illusion in my book. It's only egos competing with each other and who gets to the top of the rock, The strong of character or of personality, however you want to call that, are rarely arrogant, in my experience. Yes, they're strong, and when they come into a room, you feel it, and they understand their own strength, and they don't shy away from being that. And sometimes that's powerful. But arrogance or the need for affirmation that you are the great one, or blah blah blah. In basketball, is this word "goat," pathetic term for a team sport. Pathetic. But anyway, there's an incredible insecurity lurking underneath that. And I think we're in a hard time in our culture with and I agree completely what you said about the Romans, because that stream, that river that you used, where does that come from? Isn't that an eternal recycling principle? How long has that river been there? So where you get your ideas, the source may not be infinite, but it's very, very, very old. It's been there very, very long. And to catch that,
how many times?
Yeah, and to catch that and pass that on in a work of art resonates, I'm sure.
Yeah. How many times has that same water that you've seen, that same stream, thought, or whatever, gone through its natural cycles of things? Yeah. It reminds me of that saying. I'm not sure who it's attributed to, or if it's just it's probably attributed to someone, but the same man can't step into the same river twice, because he's never the same man and it's never the same river. That's
Heraclitus.
Okay. Yeah. It's that's a good one. That's a good one. It's just those different layers of, as a kid, you would look at that and go, no, I can step into that, just the physical picture of it, or the physical doing it. I can step into that and it's the same place. But then as you get older, as you have the more experience of life, you start to understand, no, there's more layers to things, and you can understand that nuance of what what is actually being said, that you can't step into it twice.
And let's say you're making a work of art, and you are the one then, picking that bucket of water out of the well or out of the river. How do you want that water to be?
Mm.
You want it to be as original and as pristine and as meaningful as it can be. So automatically, I think if you do it that way, and if you don't say, I am creating the water, I am actually creating everything, even the bucket is mine. If you
Mm.
don't think like that, if you think, no, I want that water to be transported in its most uh, pure, pristine state, clean state, original state, maybe straight from the well or what have you, not polluted, then you become a caretaker for the process as well. Your level of awareness of caring for not just you transporting it, as a writer, but also seeing that the water is not polluted, is not destroyed, or is not poisoned, becomes part of your task.
Mm.
So less ego, the more people think like the Romans, I think the better it will be for our culture.
Yeah. Maybe that also explains the whole you start writing something and you're not ready to do it, is because you're not the right person to step into that river at that time, that
I
you
think
need
so.
to. Yeah, that's a good one. We're really
And
going a long way with this water motif.
it's interesting. Yeah, but my second book that I'm writing now is from the perspective of Okeanos, which is the titan of the original river in Greek mythology,
Okay.
which is ocean, obviously comes from that. And the thing that I like about that perspective is the water. It's in the Greek mythology. It's pictured as a river, but it encircles the entire earth. So it's one long, like the oceans. So
Hmm.
basically, what it says is anything that comes in somewhere comes right back after it makes full
Ah,
circle. I
yeah.
found that an interesting way to have a narrative perspective for my second book. It's very hard to do though.
Are
Yeah.
How far are you along in that one?
It also has 30 chapters, just like the Achilles book. I don't know why I do that. I'm a sucker for, uh, you know, these autistic little strands of always doing the same thing, the same routines. But on the typewriter, so the first version, I wrote 24 of them. But I find it so hard going because it's like I said, a new flower. It's not as old and as ruminated through as my first book was. Um,
Hmm.
that on the rewrite on the computer, I'm at chapter 17, 18, but I'm sure that I'm going to go back. I'm not going to go back to the foundations. It will be, like I just explained, but some chapters I feel I need to get the tone better and maybe even the some of the topics. So it's not as far developed that I can just, the water is there. I've seen it, but it's not all in the bucket yet.
Do you see recurring themes in your writing?
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, well, the epiphany of Moby Dick. I believe every man searches for that. Every man and
Mm.
woman. I mean, every human.
Mm. Yep.
In my case, it's a little bit more colored by Eastern philosophies. I really, when I studied history, I was pretty much the only one interested in the Chinese history. So Taoism, Confucianism has interested me, but that led me to different strands of Buddhism. And I'm not anyist. Huh? I'm open. I'm I would I'm open to any spiritual tradition, and I believe any human being that takes care of the water is a good spiritual person, no matter what name he gives to
Mm.
his creed. And he should not want to fight anybody from another name. But that's another thing. But that's definitely something that is always lurking underneath. Um, Love, I would say, is a recurring theme and an enigma.
Mm,
And the human um, challenge to allow the water to remain pure.
mm. Not to mess it up.
Yeah, but it's so hard because you have your own um, heritage, you know, and your own experiences. And it's easier to do the wrong thing and just allow, well, that's just me. And so what if there are a few ugly spots in the water, than to really
Mm,
go where you need to go to really make it clean.
mm.
Um, this challenge is fascinating, and I think it's somewhere always in my word, in my writing.
I think I was reading in one of your bios or explanations of what you were working on now that freedom was a theme you were going for on your new book. Is that true?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. How are you basically weaving that in?
Um, well, I took the story of Ariadne and Theseus, the Greek story. So Theseus comes into uh, um, the labyrinth, and Ariadne falls in love with him. She saves him by helping him kill her half brother, the half bull, half man, and then they
Mhm.
go off together. But for some reason, he leaves her, and then she's left behind, heartbroken. But then she marries a god, and she lives happily ever after. I simplify the Greek story,
Yeah.
and but I planted that in modern days. So there is a love story, and it's deep love, and there's a lot of sacrifice in order to make the love happen. But it doesn't end in it ends in a deeper understanding, but it doesn't end in a they lived harmoniously ever after. I'm not giving everything away, but that's really the frame.
Yeah.
And where does freedom come in? I think if you are really open to true love, you can loosen some of the the baggage that you've been set in life with. You can release, and that makes you a little bit more free. You ultimately, obviously, only become free if you become like, you know, one with the whale.
Mm.
To go back to Melville,
Mhm.
or one with the process of the whale. Um, in my case, to understand that Okeanos, it doesn't matter where you start, it always comes back. They're not
Mm.
separate. So how free can a human be? That's the question the book tries to pose, and in different life strands tries to investigate a little bit. I'm not coming up with answers. I'm just um, searching and provoking rumination, basically. I am with I sorry, yeah, I'm
You're good.
thinking. Okay, thank you. I am with Jung, though, in this. Jung, I'm not in with psychoanalysis on everything, but Jung said if people do not embrace their unconscious self, so not subconscious, the unconscious self, that is what, if they don't embrace that and accept that that's part of their who they are and what makes them work, then humanity is in danger. And I don't think you can be free if you cannot recognize your sub or unconscious motives for doing or not doing things. Um, so to become a friend with where you come from and why certain automatisms have developed, and embrace them, or uh, uh, sublimate them in something new, is definitely necessary in order to be free.
How do you think that, because mythology deals with a lot of lessons and stories, that has the deeper meanings of them. how do you think that morality plays into your writing, and where do you base the morality of it?
Yeah, well, morality is not ultimately for all beings not to harm. And that's a cliche. And if we look around, we see humans and in general nature doesn't work that way. It's actually a big theme, a motif in Achilles' book.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons the narrator of the Achilles book is having a hard time is because he's looking for the old morals. Where have they gone? And that goes from small, little acts of politeness in the streets, but also to how to approach relationships, but also to spirituality, because ultimately we need uh, a spiritual foundation to build our morality upon. And it doesn't really, like I said before, I don't believe it really matters which narrative that is, be it Christian, Muslim, non-monotheistic, but there has to be a spiritual dimension. So a dimension that is, again, to come back to the metaphor of your pristine river, is an
Mm.
understanding of the river is where what it's about. It's not even the container. The container is just a medium to transport it for more people to understand or drink from. Um, and the morality in the West has been based for a very long time, not from the beginning. The beginning was basically with the Greeks, but for a very long time on Christian values. And they have eroded since the 19th century. And this has really thrown the bottom underneath away from that spiritual hold that people used to have.
Mm.
Now, is that good or bad? I don't know, but I do know we're in a vacuum. There hasn't been a replacement. The only replacement is what you see now is just think about yourself, be happy, gather so much for yourself as you can. So it's based on an atomic morality, which is not a morality. Everybody
Mhm.
each to his own. And hence the narcissism. Because if you don't have a God anymore that you can hold on to and the morals that come with it, or a spiritual tradition that you can still live in and the morals that come with it, all you have left is your individuality to hold on to, which is never enough.
Yeah. It's difficult to say you have to have this agreement in a society of the way people are going to act, the way people ought to act. So now you have to define what is the way you should act in situations. You have to have this morality. And it's difficult to make something that is unassailable by people, but made by people. So
Yeah.
you'll have all these religions that say these are the rules because this is what the God or the universe or whatever says the rules are supposed to be, and you can't question them. And there's an important part of having an authority higher than yourself. But the problem is people, a vast number of them, and maybe more and more of them these days, are asking, well, where, maybe they're not asking, maybe they're just in this society that has already fallen apart because they asked it, which was, how did we construct these religions? Where these religions come about? And it was basically the social contract of everybody together thinking, well, maybe we shouldn't do this thing. Maybe we shouldn't go kill each other for this stuff, but we could kill each other for these things. And you have to figure that out over a long time. And then you kind of memorialize that into a religion or a philosophy, and then you try to live by it. But then there is a certain amount you have to give up the answers. You can't find answers to some questions if you're giving up that authority to something else that hopefully is bigger than yourself, but you're trying to explain it with only evidence that people can come up with, or people make, or people perceive. It's I think that's why religion is falling apart, and that's why you have societies falling apart, because you don't have those values. You don't have that bowl that is created of, in the Western area, Judeo-Christian values, and you're going to hold your water in that. And now that bowl is falling apart, so you can't hold anything.
Yeah, and I find it bafflingly arrogant that we humans think that our cognition explains everything.
Hmm.
It is, and one of the things that a religion does gives to a society or a culture. Like I said, it doesn't really matter which narrative to me. If somebody's a spiritual being and a good person, the creed is just, the form of the bowl, so to speak. But
Right.
he or she is also carrying pristine water and wants the water to be pristine. Um, but one of the things it does is it humbles people to understand there are, things bigger than their needs and their individual little lives. uh, Psychotherapy could do that too, because it teaches you that everything you are is
Mm.
basically something you've been given. you know and even if we just look at it scientifically, the DNA is something that's been given to you as well. So it's also a thread that's been given. But the thing is, the humility and the humbleness is shut away from under us. The arrogance is,
Mm.
is baffling. How can we, as these small parasites on this huge planet, think that our learned cognition or consciousness explains all by way of electricity in our brains? There is
Mm.
It's like what we said, when thinking comes to us, that's somebody who opens up. And I believe religion helps cultures keep their feet on the ground, stay humble, and recognize it's not only my perception or my ideas or my needs, which opens up the heart, hopefully, for the social contract that we've lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a need for some sort of control, self-control, or the buy-in of some other, as I said before, unassailable or unquestionable authority. It's difficult to get people to buy into that, especially these days. What do you think is a good question to be able to ask of a society to see if their morals are in line with yours, or at least in line with what we saw as moral some years ago?
Well, very actual now. How can humanity get back in tune with the what the earth, so I'm not talking heaven, I'm only talking earth, I keep it small, with the
Hmm.
earth is telling us?
Okay.
So how can we become an ecological humanity again without losing what we've accomplished? We don't need to go back to the caves.
Right.
But that's a question that I would want to ask. Like Rousseau, the social contract with the um, I think that's something that really, I think we also need to change the I. The I is not me. I just wrote a poem to a professor in Seattle who inspired me to write a poem.
Hmm.
The I should be changed to earth. So where people say I need, they should change it and say earth needs. Why? Because we are that river. We're drinking from
Hmm.
it. So I would go, the new Messiah or the new enlightened being has to be an ecologically in tune with the earth, and our welcome, being remaining welcome on the earth processes. I think the new narrative has to come from there somewhere. So I would ask that to a society.
I like that. The first time I asked somebody that question on a podcast was recently. I think, let's see, this will be the 32nd one. I think she was the 29th. She's from Slovenia, and a podcaster there, and travels a lot. And I asked her a similar question to that, of how, if you had to ask a question to a society, how would you if you had to ask one question to see if it was a place you wanted to visit in your travels or understand their morality, what question would you ask? And hers was, how do you treat your prisoners and how do you treat old people? Which I thought those were good.
Yeah.
That I like those for gauging a society. My question that I would ask, if I could only ask one question, and it doesn't mean that there aren't other things you need to question about a society or a culture, is how do you treat women? Because if you're treating women poorly, chances are you're treating everyone else poorly too. But I think in societies these days, women are seen as more, I think it's more easier to oppress women. So if you're having an oppressive society, you start with the ones you think you can deal with the easiest, and then you go up from there. So my reasoning for that is, can you go into a place without covering your face? Can you go to school? Things like that. Those are, how do you treat some people like that? And then I like your addition to that question of the ecological part of, you're asking how it fits in, how it, reducing it down to how you affect Earth. That's a good one. You got
Yeah,
to add that to the repertoire there.
and I believe that we've lost um, the insight that we are children of the earth.
Hmm.
So I'm not saying children of God. That's the next level. That's for everybody
Mm-hmm.
else. It's for everybody to interpret on his own way, like I said. But I know for a fact that we are children of the earth. So why would we destroy our home?
Hmm.
This is one of the reasons I hope you guys don't vote for Mr. Trump. One of the well, the second reason is you guys have to keep these Russians off our backs, and we need you. For the third time in history, the Americans have to save Europe. Um,
Hmm.
but that,
Should have
but
put a
but
little more money in NATO there, huh? Mm.
well, we're doing it. Oh, everybody! That's one of the good things of the first Trump rule is that the Europeans are paying for NATO now. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they're upping the ante, which is necessary, unfortunately. No, but the denying of climate change and of man-made changes, I think, is very dangerous.
Certainly we affect people. We affect the climate by our actions. We're living in a snow globe. So of course, whatever chemical reactions we bring about through our own is going to affect the atmosphere inside that snow globe. I agree. And also, I think there's layers to that, the climate change, which is, even if we weren't here, the climate would change.
Absolutely.
And so that needs to be looked at too. And then the other part that scares me about the climate change argument, I don't I don't doubt that climates change all the time, that there is no static for the climate. That it does seem an easy cudgel to oppress people with, to be able to say, you need to do this, this, and this. You need to have less and like it, while this other class of people have more and oppress you. You know, I don't want to go back to the medieval times of serfs and the rich, but yeah, things need to be addressed. I'm not convinced that Trump is the problem of the world. I'm probably more to the side of Trump and his actions, at least as an American, for my feeling of it. Maybe some years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, America was a better place than it is right now. And maybe that's worldwide too. And maybe that's bigger than just America and how it affects everything. But yeah, hopefully we turn around where society seems to be going, however we turn around, and go back to maybe not the days where women can't vote, but to the days where everybody has some equal say in what's going on in their society. I hope that happens. And it'd be nice to not have some wars. That would be good. I mean, I understand humans enough to know that that's what humans do. Humans go to war. I don't know how that ever gets removed from what we are, unless what we are is, as Joe Rogan has said, the sex organs of the machine world, that we're just a the caterpillar that is going to turn into a butterfly, but we got to get into this cocoon, and then what's going to come out is some sort of computer intelligence that was brought about through our actions, and then it just builds itself after that, and then we're just left behind as whatever we are as individuals or as a species or whatever. I don't know. Big questions for an art or a creativity podcast, but it, yeah, times seem worrisome, and I wonder if it just seems more worrisome now because from an individual standpoint, I'm more aware. I'm older and I'm more aware, or was it always like this? Like in the movie Men in Black, where they say, there's an alien ship getting ready to destroy the Earth, and then I think some other character says, "There's always an alien ship getting ready to destroy the Earth." It's it's just how it is.
That's a pretty deep joke.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's
Yeah.
so hopefully things work out. It would be nice if people stopped killing each other.
But can I ask you something about the just curious how you see that, since you're
Okay,
such a thinking guy. Um,
one of the
um,
great thinkers. Yeah.
yeah, it's really enjoyable to talk to you.
Okay.
No, and this is only
Yeah.
your 30th podcast. By the way, what does hump stand for?
Hump Day is like a middle of the week, so Wednesdays. That's
Ah,
why when the episodes come out on Wednesdays, that's why it's Hump Day Calls.
oh, it's nothing to
Yeah.
do with Humpty Dumpty or anything else
Nothing
that
to do
you
with Humpty Dumpty. No.
know. Anyway, don't you think that river speaks to us in a way that we should listen to?
Oh yeah, as far as spirituality goes and
Not necessarily,
understanding that.
but when it's not clean and you care for it, you want to see it clean. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's my big point with the climate discussion. We should at least listen to what our mother, the earth, is telling us. I'm not saying do this or do that. I'm not saying abolish this or abolish that. But let our conscious open up to what it says. This is the only thing. Don't you think that is missing, kind of?
I mean, it's good to listen, to observe, to understand what's happening around you. So
Yeah, but the oceans are full of plastic. Uh, you know, you cannot deny the extreme CO2 uh, concentration growth.
is CO2 carbon dioxide?
Yeah.
Isn't that what plants breathe?
Yeah. I'm not a scientist on this. So as
Yeah.
soon as somebody
If it was
starts,
carbon monoxide, I would say that's probably not good for people. But carbon dioxide, I feel like we breathe it out. Plants breathe it in. We need plants, so let's do things that help plants. And it often feels like a lot of the things that, I don't know if you call it the New World Order or whatever, that side of society and existence is saying is we need less people. But it seems like to me that's what it all comes down to is you want to just, not you, but that side wants to get rid of more people. Like less people would be better. And
hmm,
maybe that's true, but I think we're all alive here now and the earth is holding us. So let's not abuse it, but let's not go crazy.
okay, that's a good answer. Let's not abuse it. I think that's a good guideline.
Yeah.
I'll
And
meet
then
you there.
the big thing I wrote down here about morals, and just to close out that part of the conversation, was what do you do if you're trying to find the right way to live? How do you know what the right way to live is? What religion, philosophy, or whether you're going to say you're not part of a religion or philosophy, what mixture of it are you going to accept to be able to live with everybody else in a society? And I think that's, as the individual, you say you do your best, and you got to define what your best is. And then as a group, we have to do our best. So do our best to not abuse the earth. I would agree with that. Let's not destroy everything and make the earth uninhabitable for life as we know it. Like, other life could probably live in a acid atmosphere and breathe in carbon monoxide and be fine with all the pollution. But I mean, this is what we are. So what can we do to keep the homeostasis going on Earth right now? So I think that's where you can probably find your morality in that. I just worry that some people's morality points to, let's kill billions of people so there's less people breathing out, less people eating animals, so there's less pollution in the air. And I'm not sure how based in fact all of that is versus based in ideology of just wanting to control people. I don't know.
And who's doing that, according to you?
I think there seems to be definitely different ways of thinking. I'm not rich, so I don't know how rich people think. But I can imagine if I were rich, I would think much differently. And if I was super rich, maybe I'd get to the point where I think what I think is better. So it's let's look at what the super rich say and go, is this the world we want to live in? I mean, I don't know if you like I can't remember all the names of the New World Order organizations, but like Klaus whoever, the World Economic Forum, maybe that's not the people we should be following. What's that?
Starting this week.
Yeah.
Well, let's tax them then. Let's give them, let them give, Bezos, I don't know how many billion. How can you have a billion? That's 1,000 million. How are you ever going to spend that? Why should one person have 1,000 million and millions have nothing? I think that's already amoral. But let's tax him. Let's tax him a little harder. Not you, not me. I mean, we're both not rich, but let's tax those very rich. Hey, good for you. You did a great job, and now you get to help the earth even more by giving
I
half
see.
your billions back, and we spend it to fight poverty and all the
I
good
don't want to
things.
remove the incentive to innovate. And I think that's what happens if you say you can't have $1 billion, is now we're just going to all sit around and eat borscht and, warm ourselves by a wood stove, and we're living one step up from a cave. That maybe you want to keep that. You want people to want to innovate and make things better. So there has to be some sort of reward for it. And I don't think people are capable so much of saying the reward is it helps my fellow human out.
But shouldn't that be the
But
case?
it should, but that goes back to that. How do you get people to do what they ought to do? I mean, I like the idea. Like, communism sounds good if you can get communism to ever work the way it's supposed to, but it's not going to work. It's exactly goes around, comes around. And it does kind of seem like communism breeds capitalism, capitalism breeds socialism, socialism breeds communism. And you just keep going around, and that's oversimplification of it. But I think you want people to want to make things better. So if somebody puts out more effort, then certainly they should be better. Certainly a better basketball team that puts more effort into it should win the championship, rather than people that don't put into it. So everybody, while they may have, the definitions of equality have been shifted around so much, I'm not sure even how to put it into words, but everybody, it'd be nice if people had a chance at something. Everybody's not going to start with the same chance, for sure. The starting line's different for people all over the world. And I don't know if people in our situation understand how lucky we are, but maybe through travel and seeing the world, you can understand it, that there's people that are much worse off and there's people that have a lot more. But I don't know if I'm willing to say, let's tax the people that have all the money. We'll just tax them more than everybody else. Let's just tax everybody the same. Let's
That's a
just
good
say
idea.
if
Flat tax. I'm
10% of your income, let's just
Yeah,
tax everybody
yeah, yeah.
10% of your income.
Because
If you
then
make $10, that's
yeah,
fine. If you have 10 million, that's fine.
I think that's a fair. I've always felt that's a fair principle. Yeah, and
It's that
that's a good way to do it. I don't think you break the impulse to be creative and innovative if you don't make the reward only about money.
mm,
I think it's absolutely there. Well, maybe that's maybe that's the problem. It's too much about money and less about values anymore. Maybe we should shift the weight of the values to, yes, you earn the right to earn more, but you also earn the right to be really valuable to more people because of that. Maybe that should
mm.
be together. And again, I believe we need a spiritual narrative in order to have that, give that ground, a transcending narrative that goes over our individual desires.
Mm.
So yeah, I think the principle of a flat tax, but then the entire world, everybody, all
Now we're
people.
getting into the globalism. I don't know. I don't know if humans are ready to have a one world government,
I I,
because I
I
think governments are always going to be corrupt, because humanity is always going to be corrupt. Everything a human does is going to be corrupted. And that's not a negative way of looking at things. That's just the plain way of looking at things. And I think in America, that's how the founding fathers looked at it. That's why you have all the checks and balances that are in there. And even they can get corrupted. I think a lot of it has here. But as far as success goes, I don't think you can take away that incentive of money
no, I'm not saying take it
and
away.
everything that money represents, because success is different for different people. Like, I can be happy with what I have now. I don't need billions of dollars. But there are people that that's what drives them. And it at some point it probably turns into more of a game, even though maybe it's not a game, but it's just that willingness to keep going. The willingness to do things is to be able to make this more money. So how well are they benefiting humans by making that more money? Certainly Bezos has a lot of money, but what has Bezos done for society? I mean, have how many jobs has Bezos created? How many other things has just his actions created, or created because of what he's done? There's good and bad and all that too, because then you can say, well, a lot of mom and pop places got shut down because you have an Amazon you can order things from. All right, people are still working. It's I was in Utah one time and we were on a ATV tour of one of the Canyonlands parks or somewhere out there, Moab. And the guy's like, yeah, we don't, this is a auto parts store. It was a name brand auto parts store. I can't remember the name of, but he said, we don't go to that one because we go to the local one. I was like, well, who works at that auto parts store? Isn't that a local person working there? It's certainly not somebody coming in from the big city to come out here, driving 500 miles a day to work in this auto parts store. So I think that's how, to be able to say you can do one thing and change all of society. I think you got to look at its effects through everything. That's why I think a flat tax is good. It was good I don't know if it's in the Bible or the Talmud, where they talked about how to build the temple. And it was rich people that I don't think they were Pharisees, but whatever you call them back then, the society people were like, rich people should pay for this much of the temple and the poor people can pay for this much. And they're like, no, 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 no. Everybody pays the same amount. And that's so everybody else has equal buy-in and equal ownership of this thing we're making. So I think that's a good lesson on how to deal with the world, is be as life's not fair, and people are quick to point that out, but maybe we should try to make it as fair as we can, but not at the cost of being unfair to anyone.
I
Certainly there's going
agree.
to be people that grow up in that are born into a bad situation versus people that are born in a very, what we would call, easy situation, like born rich versus born poor. Yeah, it's not the same. But
Yeah, but how many silver spoon kids that you've known in your life have really turned out to be happy people? I don't know many.
there's
It's
plenty
not.
of poor people that are unhappy too. So it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the
But
money's
I'm
not
not
going to do
saying, I
much.
don't believe it's an advantage if you don't have to work for what you earn, so to speak. Um,
Mm.
I, I'm with you, but right now the situation in the world the differences are getting larger. Oxfam Novit, an organization here in Europe, has just calculated that in my country, the rich are taxed about a little bit below 30%, and the poorer people, the median income people and below, over 40%. So that should change for sure.
Hmm.
Because
Some people aren't taxed at all either, though.
well,
There's some
that's
people that are
ridiculous.
so poor they don't get taxed.
Well,
So
that's
how do
another.
they have buy-in to the society if they're not
Yeah,
taxed at all?
yeah.
You
Well,
just
the
don't.
thing, but the thing is, I think the discontent will be bred more if those differences grow, the 1%. So we should at least bring it a little bit closer, I feel.
Yeah, I think you're going to get the haves trying to stir up the have-nots so they can fight and destroy the people in the middle. Like the destruction of the middle class is probably the worst thing for a society because it makes the poor, it makes just what you were saying, that divide larger. You've taken out the middle. So I think that's what seems to be the driving force of the Richie Riches, let's call them that, right now, is to destroy the middle class in their quest to gain more power and more money. They're trying to take it from a big section of society that has it, which are the middle class people, because you're not going to take it from the poor, but you can lord power over the poor because you have money and you can give them money, or you can give them things that they're going to say, oh, well, I like this person because they gave me this thing. I didn't have to work for it. They gave it to me. I just have to exist. It's my human right to have health care. I don't have to pay for anything or do anything. I can get it. I don't think healthcare is a human right. It's nice to have, and it would be nice if everybody had it, but you got to do something. You got to be some sort of productive for society. You can't just be the anchor, and not an anchor in a good way, but anchor in the bad way of
Mm,
society that's trying to navigate this river that's continually flowing around the world.
mm. Yeah, it's certainly interesting topics. I believe that if the very rich can give money to the very poor, eh, so that gives them power of them. We're back to fiefdoms.
Mm-hmm.
It's a return to fiefdoms. It's just through an economic. Uh, it's not through land. It's through economic power. I don't think that's
Yeah,
good either. Every
yeah,
every life has dignity at its birth. Every life, and you should, at least we should guarantee that people can live, have the chance to live
yes. Have a
with that,
chance. I like that.
with that. And by the way, if you just hold out your hand your whole life, you're on the dole your whole life. Is that a life of dignity? The person who's lived like that and then he dies, you feel he's going to feel fulfilled about this? I don't believe so.
Yeah, I don't
Maybe
think so either.
maybe I'm a kind of like paternalizing when I say that, but that's just from my own experience. Nothing is more rewarding than really, digging digging down deep and working hard for yourself and then achieving something. This is absolutely rewarding. I've written a novel after 33 years of having it in my head.
Mm.
Once it's out there, and I still kind of like the end result, and you have it in your hand, that's really rewarding. That will be with me for the rest of my life. So I don't believe a life of dignity is a life when you just do nothing and hold out your hands. But we should, on the other side, give everybody the chance to have,
Mm-hmm.
to respect the dignity of life.
Yeah, I like that. Give them a chance.
Yeah.
What to wind this up? What do you think are the? We won't do 30. We'll do 3. And I hope your number when you were playing basketball was 30. But what do you think are the 3 today? It can change over time. But what do you think the 3 biggest things you've learned from writing are?
From writing,
Mm-hmm.
there's one word for everything, but just one, if you want to get it right. That's the first thing. There is actually, and again, the interesting, this is also with coaching, that the place and the time are deciding for which word has to land. You can have the same situation in another time frame and it's a different word.
Mm.
To be really in tune with the moment, there's one word for that. Unless we haven't invented the word, then we have to invent it and we have to make a new one. That's one thing that I've learned. The second thing that I've learned is, but that's really a motif of my life. Every day you can open up your heart to life or the dignity of life a little bit more, and that will automatically open up your mind. And dealing with having to put words on paper, and I still love your analogy of the river.
Mm.
I will keep that one. I hope you don't mind that I steal it here and there.
I don't mind. It's everybody's river.
Yeah, but that process of doing that every day, I believe, brings you closer to what you really have to say in life and what you can convey. And you only learn that by doing it. So I understand. I hope that I can read Moby Dick better because of it in the future. And the third thing is, if you stick with your discipline, you will walk your days with peace of mind. And that's the greatest success that anybody can have. And I know when I go away from it, when I go away from the discipline, for whatever reason, my peace of mind is less comforting, is less relaxing the shoulders, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, what I've learned is that the discipline helps you with that. Because even if you have no inspiration, what in the world am I going to say or I'm going to do? When you sit down, it will come or it won't come, but you still will feel good that you did it, even though you wanted to stay in bed or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the writing process has helped me with all three.
Nice. I like it. It's a good place to conclude, I think. What's the best way that people can find your book and follow you on any social media that you might have?
Well, I don't think the media is social, so I'm not. I think they're antisocial, and I have a 16-year-old. I have a 16-year-old daughter, who I really have to help in that regard. But I have a website. My book is Mr. Bezos is kindly offering it, but basically
that's where I got it.
Basically all the the big chains sell it. Even in Germany and in Holland, in Belgium, you can order it. It takes a while to get, but they're there. So just Google In Search of Achilles, and you will have plenty of options.
Okay.
The brick and stone stores, if you want to get, I'm with an indie publisher. I'm not with a big publishing company. So if you want to get into the stores, you need to go on a personal tour, which for me right now is not feasible. Maybe in the future someday. I would love to do it. Love to travel the US and do things at stores, but that's not there yet. And my website, vandenbergscholten.com, I update everything on that.
Okay. And I'll have a link to that in the show notes. So if people are listening and can't write it down or want to look at a direct link to it, I have a link for that. And I also have a link for a YouTube video that you're doing an interview, but I think it's in German. It might be a different language, but it sounded German to me.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
But there'll be more. There'll be more.
Okay. All right. I appreciate for your time today and your thoughts, and I'm definitely going to finish the book. I'll send you a email about it if you want after I'm done, but I'll do a review on Amazon at the very least.
Oh, thanks a lot. Well, I would love to hear your opinion on it.
Me and Jeff Bezos are in a book club right now, and we're both reading it. So we'll talk about it, and then we'll do
Then I would love to hear his opinion as well.
Yeah. All
I
right. I
won't. I won't
appreciate your
visit him
time.
on his 120-foot yacht to get it though.
I don't know. I mean, if he wants to invite me, but yeah, I don't need a yacht that big. I'll go with a nice 24-foot sailboat. That'd probably be good for
Exactly.
me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, and I'll talk to you at the end of this. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.